Max, thanks for coming in. Good to see you. Have a seat. I just have a couple of questions for you from your resume. It looks like you have no actual experience. And it says here that you are applying for the position of CEO, and you've written that in crayon. Okay, has a sense of humor. Well, that could be handy in the lumber business, I suppose. Why don't you tell me about your last job and why you left that?
Honestly, sales just was not the right fit for me. I showed up every day. I was there all the time. From 9 in the morning until 5 in the afternoon. Meanwhile, the big boss shows up whenever he wants to. He has a secretary, an office, a power stapler. And that's when it hit me. That's my calling, right there. Boom! CEO.
Okay, is there a hidden camera somewhere? You do realize we already have a CEO. Harold Williams, our founder, our big boss.
And he's in charge of, like, everything, right?
Yes.
Sweet! That's the job I want.
I'm afraid I can't give you...
What's your best offer?
My best offer?
You know, what do you got for me? I mean, something with an office.
You don't seem to understand.
Let's say I do your job.
I'm not giving you my job.
Why not? I want it. I'd be better than you.
Well, you can't have it.
Yes, I can.
No, you can't.
Yes, I can.
No, you can't. You need to leave my office right now.
I'm not listening to you. Na 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 na.
Gloria, get security in here, please.
Yeah, Gloria, get Bobby out of my office.
Don't touch the intercom. Stop that. Okay, you just licked my nameplate.
My nameplate now. I called it.
Now stop that.
I remember as a young man thinking that leadership was all about the perks. I saw leaders as guys who got to call the shots and make the decisions at work and at home. And honestly, looked pretty good to me. This was back before the idea of servant leadership had become a buzzword. And you know, I think there are men today who use that term, servant leadership, but they don't really understand what it means. It means the buck stops with you. You need to be out front, pointing others in the right direction. And as you lead people and serve them well, it's going to require wisdom and grace. You know, I should have known better. I had a dad who really modeled how to love and lead with wisdom and with grace. Hey, Seth. How you doing?
I'm doing all right.
See what you think of this.
Wow, that is a beautiful piece of wood.
Think you can work your magic on that?
I think so. We'll see what we can do. Let me go grab some guys and I'll get it unloaded.
It's great. My dad's nickname was Hook Rainey. He grew up in a small town and he was a lefty. He had a wicked curveball. His father left him and his 8 brothers and sisters, but he didn't become a victim. He demonstrated wisdom in his business because he did all of his work within 3 miles of where he was born. He didn't cheat people out of anything as a businessman. My dad was not perfect as a leader of his family, but he certainly modeled what it looked like to be a man of grace and kindness and humility. In fact, there's a verse that I want to go get my Bible and read to you here that really summarizes who my dad was. Proverbs 9:6 reads, "Leave your foolish ways behind and begin to live. Learn how to be wise." You know, as men, we have a lot of foolishness about us. We need to learn how to love, learn how to lead, how to be wise and gracious men who know how to treat others with dignity and respect. And I'm glad I had a dad who showed me how to do that. Hey guys.
All right, let's get 2 guys on each end of this.
My name's Peter Moore, and I'm from New Orleans, Louisiana. So, the question is...
I know, it's kind of an odd question. I was expecting something a little bit more elementary, but...
What makes a leader? Well, just a quarter of a gallon, I think.
What makes a great leader?
Really stumped me.
The first guy I worked for in the Navy, actually, he was a crusty old guy that had been in the Navy for probably about 35 years, and his biggest concern was always to make sure that he looked out for his people.
I always need a leader to do something, show an example. It's easier to step up than it is to follow somebody that's doing something wrong.
Sometimes you man up and just take charge, and sometimes you don't and just fall back, you know.
A great leader is someone who stands by their word.
Someone that has the courage of his convictions.
Someone who's not afraid to speak their mind or stand up for what is true.
When the tough gets tough, you know, they still stand in there and get the job done, you know. You can't back out as much as you want to.
He takes the temptations and the trials and whatever, all as they come.
I'm not the kind of person that looks around for someone else to do it. I just do it.
Yeah.
I wish there was a leader who could handle things, but I knew it wasn't going to be me. So.
I was that leader. I was the infantry platoon leader in Iraq.
Someone who can set their own pride aside for others. I think that's the most essential.
Leadership is about a lot of things, but it's about doing the right thing.
I think the loss of vision for masculinity is at the root of so many of our societal problems. I think if we walk through the scriptures and we see what God intended a man to be, we see that when a man gets it right, everybody who is near and dear profits from that. And that's not some kind of a sexist comment. It's just saying that in God's economy, He made a man to be a leader, a servant leader. And when men become servant leaders, everybody wins.
You know, nothing in life happens apart from leadership. I mean, so I get the fact that it's a big issue, and it will always be a big issue, because nothing in life happens apart from courage, nothing in life happens apart from leadership. Somebody has to lead us to do something, and they need to be the model to do it. But I also think we're making so much of it that it's scaring us to death. You know, we need to be more concerned about leader development than leadership development. And I think in the Bible, there are 4 amazing character qualities that every man, every person that is called to lead needs to have. And these are counterintuitive. Brokenness is important because it gets us away from self-reliance. Brokenness says that my life is not about my life is about someone that's greater than me. And so it's a holy handicap that keeps us dependent upon God. That's what I mean by brokenness, and you've got to settle that. You got to settle what's really important there. And by the way, when I say brokenness, I'm not talking about woundedness. Woundedness is unhealthy. But brokenness is a healthy reliance upon the Lord. By uncommon communion, I really believe that God gives us assignments that's greater than our capacity to meet. There's always gap in leadership. It's always beyond where you are. And so God is the one that fills in that gap. The illustration is Moses, who had a tent of meeting in Exodus 33. And every day he would go outside the camp in that tent of meeting. And I guarantee you I know what he prayed. I guarantee you. He had the task of leading 2.5 million Jews, right? He went into that tent of meeting and said, God, help me. Help me. I don't have what I need. And God would give him what he needed for that moment. But you got to press into God to get what you need to do what he's told you to do so that you can become that. The third characteristic that every great man or woman of God had in common, or anybody that has a role of leadership has in common, is servanthood as an identity. And that last part is terribly important, as an identity. Written into the hearts of great leaders is a love and a care for the people that they serve and lead. They love them. And that's part of who they are. It's part of their identity. Jesus washing the disciples' feet is probably the ultimate illustration in the Bible of servant leadership. Peter gets ticked off because in the culture back then, if you were a household of some substance and you had servants, it was the lowliest of all the servants that did the hospitable thing of washing the swollen, dirty feet of your visitors. And Jesus could have pulled the rank card and said, Peter, James, John, Andrew, Bartholomew, you guys get a bucket of water and wash these feet while I go look over my message here in this upper room discourse. And it'd been legit, why should he do this? And that's the reason why Peter was incensed. But basically, Jesus told Peter, why don't you close your mouth? Because I want to teach you a lesson in leadership that you will never forget. Ever forget. That if you're called to lead, you belong to the community of the towel and the basin. And by very definition, leadership is not about position. It's not about title. In the Bible, leadership is only given as a platform to serve. That's the only authority you have. By radical immediate obedience, what I'm really trying to say by that, and it's kind of a little redundancy in that line, but what I'm really trying to say is that, if you're called to lead, there's a sacred assignment that God's given you, and there's truth that you need to steward. And that truth is not arbitrary. It's not a bunch of opinions and traditions. These are truths that are worth dying for. And everybody that depends on me as a leader, my wife and my kids need to look into my eyes and realize, Dad's not perfect, my husband's not perfect, but I know that there are some things that this man will die for. There are some things that he's not going to walk away from. He's not going to violate these things. His life is defined by these things. And that's what we need to be called back to. I think when we get to heaven, we're going to be surprised at who God will put an exclamation mark behind as a great leader.
Men are called to lead. They're called to lead in the home, not being overbearing, not throwing their weight around and acting like they're superior, but being servant leaders like Jesus. Jesus said in Mark 10 that the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve and to give his life as a ransom for many. And that's the example of servant leadership. That's what we're called to in the home and in the church. And that's a high calling.
I tend to teach through books of the Bible. I think I've taught through 15 some books of the Bible at this point. In 1 Peter 3, he's got the section on husbands and wives and talks about husbands being considerate with their wives and not being harsh, not being physically intimidating because she's the weaker vessel. And that's where a guy needs to be tough for his family and tender with his family. A guy who's only tender all the time, he allows the bullies to hurt his family. I mean, his wife gets run over and his daughters get sexually assaulted. The guy who's only tough, he doesn't just protect his family, he's the one who hurts them, emotionally, physically, spiritually. whatever the case may be. So, yeah, I was preaching that sermon, and my notes are usually very minimal. I make up most of the cross-references and illustrations. They just sort of happen in the moment. I'm more of an extemporaneous preacher. And so I just kind of got fired up, and what came to mind for me in that sermon, I was thinking about some guys who beat their wives, to be honest with you. Some guys who are physically violent with their kids, some guys who, you know, they're wife beaters, they're kid assaulters, and they would think they'd be masculine because they were tough, as if it was tough to hit a kid or to beat on your wife. And so, yeah, I just started thinking about those guys, and all of a sudden what was a sermon just sort of shifted into a counseling session that everybody got to watch, because usually that's how I go at those guys when the doors are closed. Some of you guys, it's so frustrating. Some of you guys have been coming here for years. You still got your hands all over your girlfriend. Some of you guys have been coming here for years. You're still not praying with your wife. Some of you guys have been coming here for years. You're still single and having sex. Some of you guys will even as I'm preaching the sermon, some of you will be sitting next to your girlfriend or your fiance or your wife. Some of you guys have already given her that look. Don't cry. Don't let them know they're talking about me. Just hold it together. You've already intimidated her right here. Some of you guys have already whispered in her ear, I don't want to hear it. We're not talking about this in the car on the way home. Some of you have already whispered in her ear, I'm sorry, I'll do better, trust me. Let's just move on real quickly. How dare you? Who in the hell do you think you are? Abusing a woman, neglecting a woman, being a coward, a fool, being like your father, Adam. Who do you think you are? You are not God. You are just a man. You're not an impressive man. You're not a responsible man. You're not a noble man. You're not a respectable man. You're not a responsible man in any regard. I don't care how successful you are. In this area, if you are a failure, it clouds all of your dignity. It robs all of your masculinity. There is no excuse for any man who claims the name of Christ to treat a woman in a dishonorable, disrespectful way. Some of you right now, you guys will get all angry. Oh, how dare he yell at me? That's the Holy Spirit telling you it's you. I didn't name you, he did. You change now, little boy. You change right now. You shut up, you put your pants on, you get a job, you grow up, and maybe one day you can love a woman. It's for men, not for boys. And those of you men who are here and your wives are suffering under your folly and failure, shame on you. And shame on you if you say you're a Christian. And shame on you if you've been attending Mars Hill. And shame on you if you've been surrounded by good men and have pursued none of them. And shame on you if you've not become a member and submitted to spiritual authority. And shame on you if you've not joined a community group so you can walk in darkness. And shame on you if you show up to put communion in your hands, representing the body and blood of your murdered Savior, and then go put him on your girlfriend, or download porn from the internet, or raise your hand in a threat to your wife. Shame on you. You guys are a joke. And there's a handful of good men that are tired of picking up your mess. So you step up, you shut up, you man up, and you use all of that anger you have toward me right now to repent. You do business with God. I did get a lot of positive feedback from women saying, thank you for sticking up for me, thank you for sticking up for us. My husband's a jerk and a bully, and all I've ever heard in the church is, he's the king, so submit, and he gets to do what he wants. Which means if we have a situation where we're telling the women to obey the Bible and not the men, we're inherently creating an abusive context. He's God, does whatever he wants, and you just submit to that. That's not what the Bible says. The Bible says, husbands, love your wives like Christ loved the church. It says to be considerate with her. It says to give yourself up for her. It doesn't say you get to be the bully. That's not what it says.
Lead me, song, take one.
I look around and see my wonderful life, almost perfect from the outside. In picture frames, I see my beautiful wife, always smiling, but on the inside, I can hear her saying, lead me with strong.
I wrote the song Lead Me after a time in my life when my wife and I were going through a difficult season for us. It was a time when we had a really hard time resolving our conflict. The Lord was really tearing down some of the walls that we had built towards each other because of a lot of our communication was, I would say, kind of contemptuous or defensive. And all those walls that we had built, we've been praying for months that God would just take them away. And he really was faithful to do that and to get us to a place where we could kind of hear each other's hearts again.
Oh, but I still feel alone.
So I remember after that, my wife sat me down at our dining room table and she started really sharing with me her heart about some of the things that she had needed from me as a leader in our home, for her and for our kids, that she really had wanted to see in me that she felt that she hadn't seen.
Hard. I tell myself they'll be fine.
You know, I thought I was leading. I really did. But hearing her heart, I just didn't understand her language. I was really broken when I realized some of the things that I think I thought that I had been giving, but it wasn't really exactly what she had needed, and the ways that I had hurt her by not understanding her. I think a lot of the conflict that Sarah and I had was that I really didn't know how to leave my weariness from being a musician on the road at the door. I really brought it home with me. Instead of being her support and her rock, it's easy for me to want to go to her and almost take my burdens and place them on her back instead of picking up hers. And so I've really been trying my hardest to get more rest on the road and try to do some things to prepare myself just spiritually and mentally to walk through the doors, to be ready with the mindset that I'm going to be more focused on what she needs from me in terms of what I can give in a day.
Oh, Father, show me the way to lead them.
I love how the song really turned into a prayer, because still to this day, that's my prayer. You know, I don't really have the strength. Marriage is extremely difficult. You know, life is difficult. And so many days, I don't know, you know, how to draw that strength, but I know where to get it, and somehow he gives it to us. I also love watching other people sing it. That's my favorite part about singing the song live, is in the bridge, when the prayer comes, to see men in the room who are fathers and husbands or hope to be fathers and husbands. Even, you know, some men who later I find out have really made a mess of things, lifting their hands, just begging the Lord to give them that strength.
So, Father, give me the strength to be everything I'm called to be. Oh, Father, show me the way to lead them. Father, lead me, 'cause I can't do this alone.
What does it look like to lead my family? Well,
I need to know where I want my family to be. My wife and I are the only vision that we've ever entertained would be that we would finish with all of our children around us in the Lord, following Christ, grandchildren on the same path. That's all I have cared about, is I want my kids with me in eternity. I want them with the Lord. And I'm telling you, nothing else matters. Not their grades in school, not where they go to college, no secular vision for my kids. It's always been clear at our house that there's no success apart from loyalty and commitment to Jesus Christ. Now, that's what a leader is concerned about. He's concerned about what's the end game? Where are we trying to get to? The way a leader affects that, I think the two big tools of leadership are clarity. Okay? Clarity, clarity, clarity. The power's in the clarity. What are you trying to say? I'm saying this. This is it. Okay? So there's power and clarity. And then the second thing a leader brings to bear upon it is urgency. So it's clear and it matters, okay? He can communicate a sense of urgency. This must happen. Without it, we lose no matter what we win. And with it, we win no matter what we lose. I think a leader is strong in those two categories. I know that's what I'm working on.
If I'm reading Genesis 3 right, a man's life is adversity. Everything he was called to cultivate is going to war against him. And for all of us then, life requires courage. There's going to be conflict, there's going to be difficult days, there's going to be difficult scenarios that we're going to have to engage in. And courage is doing what you know is right, regardless of what that circumstance is. So confronting somebody in love, balancing your checkbook, these are all little acts of courage.
The thing that attracted me to Leslie, well, it was love at first sight. And I told one of my frat brothers, I said, man, I got to get to know her. She's beautiful. It started real slow, conversation, a phone call, and finally a visit. It took a while. It took a long while.
He came down to visit at my home and asked my dad for my hand in marriage. And a year later, 4 days after my 19th birthday, we got married.
I used to have to go to work at night, and we had just moved into a new apartment.
I went to spend the night at my parents' house in the evenings while he worked the graveyard shift because of fear.
And I said, this is not going to happen anymore. I'm not going to drop her off anymore. She needs to stay home. I've just felt it. Taking her back to her parents' house was just a step backwards.
The night that he put his foot down, the fear of staying in the house by myself and the fact that I wasn't going to get my way became a real issue.
So I told my wife, my lovely wife, babe, tonight you're not going. And she had a fit.
At the moment I realized that he was serious, I threw my bag down and I was yelling at him and screaming at him, and then it went to hitting him and kicking him. The whole time he remained calm. He just took my two arms and held him to my side so that I couldn't hit him anymore. And eventually he asked me if I was done, and I said yes.
And I said, look, I love you, I got to go to work. And I went on my way.
Partly I was thinking, how am I going to make it through the night? Honestly. And partly I was thinking, this man really loves me and is a real man. At that moment, part of me was just admiring him and the way he had responded, and realizing that he had showed me unconditional love at a time, again, when I was being very unlovable. Because of the way he responded and gained my respect, great respect, I wanted to do whatever I could to serve him. I had enough respect for him after that night to allow him to be the head of the house and lead me in marriage.
I think the term servant leader has become almost a cliche. Guys use the phrase, but they really don't understand what they're saying when they use it. A leader has to function like a skilled craftsman. He knows what needs to happen, and he leads others in the right direction with wisdom, skill in everyday living. And he leads gently, patiently, kindly, with grace. I know for the first 20 years of my marriage, I had a lot of learning to do. I still do. But I made a decision about 20 years ago with Barbara where I had to take everything I'd learned from the past and apply it to a very difficult situation with her. You see, we disagreed on what to do on a major decision. She believed we ought to do one thing, I believed we ought to do another thing. And we couldn't come to a decision. And earlier in my marriage, I wouldn't have listened to her. I would have been impatient with her. I stayed put, not for a week, not for 2 weeks, but for 4 months. I listened because it was a big decision. And I wanted to make sure she felt valued and honored as my partner in life until finally it became time to make the decision. And at that point, Barbara respected me and she respected the fact that I'd listened to her and she was able to follow me as a man. If you're going to lead your wife, you need to be able to empty yourself of yourself. That's how we as men truly step up and become the men God created us to be. He called us to empty ourselves so that we can love and lead with wisdom and with grace.